Well, I'm John Furrier with theCUBE. We are here at the MCP Dev Summit in New York City in North America. So this is the North America version. This is the beginning of the next wave, part of the Agentic AI Foundation. We announced the executive director, whole new staff, building out another wave. Of course, we were present at creation during the CNCF KubeCon when it all came together, and that has set the foundation. Chris is here, he's the CTO of the Linux Foundation. Chris, great to see you, CUBE alumni. This is not your shows, but you're still involved, and Cloud Native has done its job, set the table.
It's nice to be here. It's nice to have another new organization as part of the Linux Foundation family. You know, it's hard to avoid the rise of AI the last year, and agents are, all around us. I'm sure many of us are using agents today as maybe a personal assistant or a therapist, whatever, or helping with development. And as you know, at KubeCon last week, AI and agents were very much at the forefront. We kind of consider CNCF and the Kubernetes ecosystem kind of that like underlying infrastructure plane where a lot of this stuff is running on and coming together.
My opening line and my report on the keynote was Cloud Native, meet AI Native. Almost like meet my friend kind of thing. But this has been in the works for a while. I know you're very active in a lot of the projects over the years. We've covered that on theCUBE. This is obviously on the radar. You guys worked hard. Jim was actually very happy to have an executive director. His life got a little easier.
Yeah, he's happy.
You're relieved a bit. But the importance of what Cloud Native did, if you look back, and I could look back 15 years ago when the paper came out of Google, Craig and the team, Joe and everyone's there, it's like, okay, there was a lot of good work that was done. And it was very missionary work, laying the bricks down, laying the foundation, again, standing on that foundation. Cloud Native set the table where we are. And this is a super important point because the growth of AI and a lot of the velocity and some of the creation from the builders is because of Cloud Native. So Cloud Native and AI native infrastructure and apps are coming from open source. They're working together. Explain this. I think this is an architectural shift built on cloud native distributed hybrid cloud.
For sure. I mean, if you look at, let's start with like an agent, right? You could almost think of like agent as a smarter, different type of microservice, like in cloud native context, right? What do microservices need to do to be successful? They need to be managed, they need to be observed, they need to be secured so nothing bad happens. There needs to be guardrails, they need to be isolated. These concepts still apply to the world of agents. Agents are just like a little bit smarter where there's been a lot of fun cases of like agents breaking out of sandboxes and doing kind of clever things to get around maybe some of the tools that we developed in CNCF to kind of isolate and lock down microservices, but containers could, agents are smart and they could change a path that all of a sudden is no longer detected by a security scanning tool and they'll go break out. So the infrastructure has to evolve a little bit, but the kind of way we see it in CNCF is like, look, agents and especially inference-based workloads, they all have to essentially run and be orchestrated by some kind of central system, and that happens to mostly be Kubernetes these days, and the surrounding ecosystem. Like, how do you observe things? Well, OpenTelemetry has pretty much standardized that, right? OTel's evolving to kind of support agent related semantics. A lot of these things are being sandboxed now, and what are we good at in CNCF? Sandbox technology, right? And there are going to be some changes for agents, but we're kind of going through this evolution where things are growing. I don't think a lot of people realize that one of our first case studies for in CNCF regarding AI was like OpenAI in like 2019 of how they were like growing and scaling using. So that was a while ago. So it's super fun. It's like it's exciting times. Things are changing.
What's fun? What I love about and following being in the community with the Cloud Native, it's fun to watch the growth. But interesting things I want to get your reaction to. Last year at GTC in DC and GTC just recently in San Jose. That's the AI infrastructure build-up. That's semiconductors, that's the large-scale AI factories, again, empowering a lot of the tokens that are feeding the agents and AI. And I ran into a bunch of Cloud Native cohort friends, and they're like, hey, what are you doing here? They're like, I heard that, I'm just checking out this AI, because it's almost like they've been heads down jamming on Cloud Native, making it all work. And so you start to see the Cloud Native ecosystem like look up and say, wow, a lot of the stuff we're doing is being filled in this next abstraction layer like containers are more relevant than ever before, the microservices. So you're starting to see the cloud native leaning into this new other agentic infrastructure layer. Of course, there's AI native apps. Open clause, a lot of buzz. People are smoking a lot of that these days. Everyone under the age of 30 is drinking the open claw Kool-Aid, which is great. Hey, get addicted. We love it. But this infrastructure agentic layer looks a lot like DevOps about 2010, 2013. So you're starting to see a new persona emerging that's interfacing with cloud native expertise. Certain things are rising up. What's your reaction to that?
You know, every technology goes through an evolution, right? Like this rise of AI has basically taken the world by storm the last 2 years, and it's continues to grow in usage, and that's great. You have all these interesting things built like OpenClaw or ChatGPT, Gemini that people are just using, continuing to increase usage. They're now trying to kind of figure out scale and infrastructure kind of almost after the fact. So funny thing, you mentioned GTC. You see a lot of companies that may have been they wrote a service mesh that was good for the cloud native microservice world, and now they kind of have these like agent message or agent gateways as they call it. So like this evolution is just like is happening to kind of fill these use cases.
And Nvidia is joining in.
Yeah, Nvidia joined as a platinum member at KubeCon last week. They contributed $4 million for us to use GPUs for testing and doing cool things with CNCF projects. We're using a lot of kind of, you've probably heard the term NeoCloud, which is kind of a fun,
it's not a hyperscaler, basically.
No, it's not a hyperscale, but like sometimes it's funny talking to some of the folks in the AI world. There was this conversation, person will remain nameless, but they're like, oh yeah, we don't use legacy clouds. We use like what's a legacy cloud? And they were like, oh, like an Azure, and I'm like, crazy world. But yeah, there's a lot of these kind of GPU only focused things. The reality of the day is people, we saw this early in CNCF, right? Where most people were, usually stuck on one cloud or had like a private cloud set up. In AI world, they're using maybe like one primary service or maybe one GPU provider. People are going to use multiple, options, right? How are you going to go, maybe this stuff is getting expensive, and maybe you want to start building local models that run on your infrastructure and then farm out to an API to run in the cloud. So all these like dynamics that we had to deal with CNCF in the early days of, hey, we got to run stuff needs to run on multiple clouds. There needs to be some consistency there, and so on. And I see the same thing kind of happening in the agent and MCP world. And the other funny things is just at this event, the MCP world itself has things like MCP UI, MCP apps, and there's kind of like competing specs and ways to do things. Same thing happened in the early crazy days in CNCF where we had to like container storage interface, we had to do container runtime interface, container networking interface. So all this kind of innovation that's happening now will probably eventually standardize into improvements to the MCP itself, or maybe like another spec or something in that regard.
One of the things I was talking to Jim about yesterday was the role of standards. And you mentioned a few things that are going on. Fragmentation ends up not being a good thing.
But it always happens in the early days.
So what have you learned, and again, as I said earlier, in Linux Foundation, has got the muscle experience. What have you learned from the CNCF and broader LF, Linux Foundation, that you see as an imperative for the agentic foundation to watch? Because if you get the standard, de facto is fine, right? But what are some of the things you imagine is going to occur, and what are you thinking they'll rein in on? What will they focus on?
So we've been working closely with the Agentic AI Foundation, kind of their equivalent of their technical board, TOC, and they kind of asked us, what lessons did you learn? And we have this fascinating document in CNCF that we created in the early days called our technical principles of like kind of what we seek in the foundation, what we allow, what we don't like to do. A few of the concepts were no king making. We generally don't want just only like one type of project, right? Like not one service mesh, not one gateway, not one storage technology. So there's usually overlapping project. That approach has been very successful. We've evolved through over the years where when CNCF was started in the early days, most people used Flannel as kind of the networking technology. That was like pre-eBPF popularity, and then Cilium kind of came out of nowhere, and then like everyone moved to Cilium. So that note key-making principle and being flexible to allow innovation and competition leads to better solutions for end users, and I think that is something that I hope the organization is going to take to heart, because they're an early innovation. Like if you remember this, and when we did KubeCon in Berlin, we literally brought Docker and CoreOS on stage at the same time and said, like, look, we're taking both container runtimes at once.
Yeah, also I'll point out that you guys also did something really clever. It was not you guys did, but the community did. That you enabled was end user contribution.
Correct.
The role of Lyft and Netflix. All
Spotify with Backstage.
Spotify, Intuit.
Yep.
What do you imagine the end user looking like on the agentic? Because you have a lot of end users doing some cool stuff.
Yeah, I feel like, at this event, I've come across a lot of financial institutions who I'm sure are grappling with, like, holy crap, how do we deal with essentially what is a non-deterministic system and giving it access to very important information that needs to be controlled, audited, through regulation. So I think those types of end users are going to give great feedback to kind of improve the technology here, and I think the AF will be very good at kind of getting that.
How do you view the model providers playing in between both groups? Obviously, on the AI agentic side, OpenAI, Anthropic, Google's on both sides. So, like, is it split personalities, split teams, or how do you see the intersection?
I think there's this friendly competition and co-opetition. Like the model providers have their own infrastructure. Anyone building and running inference on these models runs in tons of infrastructure issues, right? And sharing that information, even with your competitors, is good, right? That happened in CNCF. That the same thing will happen in the agentic world. Like just today, we announced a new effort in the Linux Foundation called X402, agentic commerce, right? How do agents handle payments and transactions, and how to do that in a secure, reasonable, standardized way? Huge problem to solve. So companies.
A lot of volume. A lot of action, good for agents.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what agents could do the work on our behalf, right?
Of course, right? But that's a huge problem because a lot could go wrong. You hear all the funny OpenClaw stories. I gave OpenClaw access to like my bank account or Stripe, and it just went crazy, right? Like we need to figure it out, right? I think the industry will come together and figure this out.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because I was going to ask that a question along those lines, because you just brought up that project. That's not in the Agentic AI Foundation. So I want to ask you, at large, amongst the Linux Foundation, there's a lot of great projects that have been going on. There's a lot of stuff orbiting around some of these key gravity moments. The foundations are just gravity for large communities. So can you share how you see these other projects intersecting? Payments is one. You got PyTorch. You got a lot of things happening.
Yeah, I mean, in the Linux Foundation level, so if you look at AI, we've kind of come up with this model where there are the folks that train the models, right? Deep research scientists are working truly innovative techniques, mostly around the PyTorch ecosystem. You have AIF, which is mostly focused on the agentic, world, how do agents talk to each other, how do agents potentially do transactions, financial transactions and so on. And then you have CNCF that is mostly focused on like scaling the infrastructure, doing it, running inference, on the models that are created by like the PyTorch and model folks. And this kind of line between agentic, inference infrastructure and then kind of training infrastructure, those are kind of the three, foundational, groups. Yes, there's always a little overlap. Then you kind of have like end user communities, right? As you're aware, we have like the FinTech Open Source Foundation, which has a lot of financial folks that are bringing internal infrastructure. You have Automotive Linux, the crazy guys putting Linux and open source in cars, right? And then you have this new thing around agentic payments, and they're getting together all like the banks and the folks, and they have different needs than potentially something at AF that is a little bit broader. So they're starting in their little sandbox. But at the end of the day, it's like the Linux Foundation. People who come here that want to start a project and build a community, like we'll work with them. We never force people to integrate. Like in the early days of CNCF, they were like, why don't CNCF and Cloud Foundry just merge? Like you don't, like it's whatever the community wants. Like we don't force things. It just organically happen. Maybe in the future.
Well, it's also the community also is a barometer, a bellwether, whatever the word you want to use. Like for example, cloud ops and FinOps. It's become budgets. Costs, right? I mean, right now we're seeing AI kind of like, wait a minute, what's the cost of this? So I'm sure there'll be a version of AI costs or whatever you want to call it.
No, it's already happening. The FinOps community, you should have JR if you haven't had him in a while. Like
he's awesome.
They've redone and kind of revamped their focus standard to now start to include AI related things. You remember the whole concept like shadow IT? Developers internally are just like spending tokens like
there's
crazy.
a ton of shadow AI going on.
It's all over the place.
Why? Because it's innovative. The community's active. Engagement's huge. FinOps will be there in San Diego covering. I'll see JR there, but I'm sure this will be on the agenda.
No, it's going to be huge because it's become like a top bill for folks, and so people need to have some sanity.
I mean, the role of the practitioner has always been an IT thing, shadow IT, you mentioned that. You guys really set the standard on community, open source development. You're seeing a lot more operations. I mean, DevOps was cloud, DevSecOps had security, I'm sure AI Sec would have come in, but there's a real operational focus now with AI because you've seen a lot of agents have implications, the role of the CFO, price of tokens. The human resources department's getting involved because they're doing work. Do they do a good job? So there's a lot of C-suite interactions. We're covering that, but also the organic is growing super fast. What's your, as someone who's seen the movie, how do you frame that? Because now the enterprises are coming in, the builders are going, builders, operators, and investors are all there.
We are super early. We're at the kind of, you're familiar with like Gartner hype cycle. We're in the early innovative days. Like there is still basic standardization that needs to be done. Like Kubernetes and CNCF wouldn't have been successful if we didn't define standards of like, what is a standard like image? How do you do storage probably? How do you do networking, probably? How do you do standardized telemetry? We're kind of in that early days here with like all this experimentation. There's tons of startups. There's poor people here probably getting yelled at by their CEOs like we need to be AI native, go find something, and they're standing up teams to do that. So we're still in that early experimental stage where things will eventually gravitate to, all right, maybe we should all work together on how to do agentic commerce one way. Maybe you should come together to figure out how to do telemetry for agents, and that's happening. The other funny thing that I'm seeing right now is there's kind of teams that are usually stood up by, whether it's the office of CTO or like a special team that's like, hey, go figure out how to accelerate our AI usage in the company, right? And they've kind of stood up their own infrastructure using their own tools. There's a separate, like, it's called platform team, platform engineering, what do you call it, that like runs the business basically, right? And now what's happening is like the price pressure that you were alluding, like, oh, this stuff's getting expensive, or like, hey, actually this stuff needs to be really secured. They're trying to get the poor platform, like yet another thing that the platform team now has to do, and we're kind of seeing that pattern now. That like,
what shift is that? Shift left, up, or down?
Yeah.
I mean, where is that shift?
It's like people just
it's coming together. It's converging.
It is. And to your earlier point, like the cloud native, AI native are kind of coming
it's
together.
A great match. I got to tell you, I am super excited because about a year ago, 2 years ago, cloud native and AI were on different tracks. Now they're coming together. They're having a party together. It's all kind of meeting in the middle. And this brings up the point about architecture. All the winners, the builders who are starting companies and innovating in the ecosystem, to new ideas, even existing incumbents evolving, is an architectural shift. I remember in 2011 to 2013. The rage was VMs, Zen, VMware. I mean, virtual machines made the cloud.
Of course.
But then the cloud became APIs. But containers, death of the container, long-lived containers. The architecture is kind of, you see VMs going away. Containers now have a new renaissance. Share your thoughts on the role of the container. APIs are still around. MCP is going to be a delegation mechanism through all that.
Containers are for sure going to stick around. Like I even see like VMs not necessarily fully going away either. They serve a purpose, especially around isolation, right? There's even let's call it a new new VM style technology called micro VMs. People are probably familiar with Firecracker as an example, which is an Amazon project they use to run kind of Lambda on their serverless stuff. So I think VMs are going through an evolution, but this stuff's not necessarily going away. Like workloads need to be isolated.
VMs aren't the platforms that run everything on.
They're not.
They're situational.
They are. And then if you look in this agent world, especially at this event, there are companies out there that are billing themselves as we are the sandbox isolation technology for agents and in your AI workloads. And if you kind of peer and look underneath what's down there, all right, it's okay, this is they're using micro VMs or Firecracker, or they're using containers and then gvisor, to kind of isolate things, or they're using crazy WebAssembly based technology or isolates, V8, isolate. So at the end of the day, it's people are going to use what makes
choice.
sense. Yeah, it's choice.
So I want to get you out. I was talking to a developer the other day in a large enterprise. I won't name names. Very progressive, very strong, open source. The enterprise was using the big models, paying through the nose.
Of course,
for use cases that were what's the weather today?
Something simple.
What's 1 + 1?
Yeah.
I mean, not that bad, but and so what they've been doing is the open source models are resonating. And so you're starting to see a glue layer emerge where it's hey, I could use open source and then pay the premium. Jensen had the Pareto curve on Vera Rubin, he had different levels. You're starting to see these tiered services, almost like a product positioning map where you can say, okay, for the big heavy lifting, I want to pay up, but I want to use open source. Maybe it's a different edge device. Or You're starting to see now the models in the developer frameworks.
You know what we called that in cloud native context? That was essentially the notion of hybrid cloud. It's hey, you get to use maybe public cloud services that are beneficial that you're interested in. They have something cool maybe, or innovative, or a type of service, database, whatever that you're interested in. And they also have private cloud, which was cheaper depending on what you're doing, and you maybe oscillate and choose what is relevant. Same type of thing is happening here, where it's some of the latest models are not cheap, and the open source models are getting significantly better that are going to run on private cloud. There's even a bunch of startups now that are popping up to kind of serve this market, and so I think you'll see a future where there'll be architectures that kind of model that old private cloud, use private cloud or public cloud depending on your needs.
It's not even inning one, it's spring training for this game. Chris, great to have you on theCUBE.
Of
you
course.
Such a great perspective. It's been always great to have you on theCUBE. We've had many years riffing and looking at the build out. My final question for you is for the folks watching, okay, we're having I'm kind of having a KubeCon
this is
CNCF moment.
This is KubeCon 2017 type feeling. Right?
Describe what this new foundation means. If you could look at a trajectory, what's this about?
Sure.
What is this Agentic AI Foundation about? What does it mean, and how can I relate to it?
Agents are going to be at the core of almost everything we do, whether it's coding, personal assistance, commerce. It is going to move to a more automated agentic world, right? This organization, this event is basically the early days of building standards and bringing projects that kind of bring sanity and collaboration to this space, right? A lot of people want to build successful businesses. A lot of end users want to deploy this in their thing. We're all getting together, kind of figure that out, just like we did in the early days of CNCF, right?
And cloud native is the foundation.
Exactly. And if you are interested in running agents in production or at scale, you gotta be here. You gotta get involved, because this stuff is even moving faster than cloud native was. And early days, we had 2-3 years of build up, before all the clouds joined, all the hyperscalers. This has a crazy amount of energy and innovation going on. You have to be here, otherwise I think you're just gonna be left behind. You gotta show up, right?
Well, being in the arena with you guys over the years, watching the new executive director and the management team, congratulations, really super happy for you guys in the industry again. I didn't think it could be another next level, but we're at another next level.
Here. It's awesome. Show up if you truly care. This is the place to go. We have MCP Con and Agent Con coming up, and would love to have you there.
MCP Con and Agent Con, two monster conferences again. If you're in the industry and you're not present at creation, my advice is this wave's going to happen a lot faster than KubeCon. KubeCon did the legwork, they did the heavy lifting, they set the table, it is the substrate, it's distributed computing, it's hybrid cloud. This is computer science next gen, but now everyone can code.
Yeah.
That's the beautiful thing.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
So you're going to have zillions of developers. Of course,
Yeah.
theCUBE will be embedded in the community as we always have been. Thanks for watching. My name is John Furrier, host of theCUBE, with Gemma Allen here in New York City.